Hey guys, what's going on? It's me, Jay, here to talk a little bit about the Patrisse Cullors situation. Patrisse Cullors, of course, a, um, one of the three women who back in 2012 founded the Black Lives Matter organization in a response to um, the killing of Trayvon Martin by George Zimmerman. And over the years, as police brutality has increased, um, Patrisse Patrisse and her friends, Alicia Garza and Melina Abdullah, have enriched themselves on the backs of the victims of Black Lives Matter. We've had Eric Garner, we've had Breonna Taylor, we've had um, Freddie Gray, we've had, and of course, the biggest one, 2020, uh, the reinvigoration of the organization and the biggest case they've had thus far, George Floyd. And each and every time they get more donations and more donations. Well, she has bought um, a home for over $1 million. And Candace Owens, everybody's favorite conservative YouTuber, of course, burst onto the scene in 2017 in defense of the protesters in Charlottesville who were protesting the removal of Robert E. Lee's statue, and it ended up into a big riot in which Jane Field Jr. murdered Heather Heyer, and that's when Candace Owens first appeared on the scene on YouTube as Red Pill Black Girl, and now Candace is big time. We did other videos on her. She now works for Ben Shapiro's media alternative conservative media organization, The Daily Wire. She's the only female and the only black contributor there. She, of course, too, is the author of Blexit, trying to organize this mass movement of black people out of the Democratic Party to the Republican Party. And she was a big time supporter of President Donald Trump. He gave her a shout out in one of his speeches in 2020 when he was running for president. So we all know who she is, done several videos on her. And she's making this documentary on the evolution of Black Lives Matter. And she goes to this woman's house and she investigates what this woman, Patrisse Cullors, is doing with this over $1 million home. And now the woman, Patrisse, is claiming harassment. She's over there crying. She made a video herself crying, saying that Candace was causing her emotional distress, saying that Candace was harassing her. She had Candace arrested. Now, the thing is, you guys may not like Candace Owens. You know what I mean? You may not agree with Candace Owens' political opinions. You may think Candace Owens is a sellout, an Uncle Tom, or whatever, a C word. I don't use that word, but some people do, you know, in regards to people like that. But that doesn't change the fact that it's a C word that rhymes with noon. That doesn't change the fact that what Candace is saying is actually true. That the founders of Black Lives Matter are partying it up. They purchased this house in 2020. There was supposed to be a meeting house for other BLM members. And what did we find out? That she had a party for her son. She had a party for her son on public grounds with public funds. So as the victims of police brutality roll in that they're supposed to represent, as you get more Trayvon Martins, more Freddie Grays, more Michael Browns, more George Floyds, more Breonna Taylors, more Eric Garners, that's good for them because they continue to make money and they continue to feed off it. Now, I don't agree with Candace when she says that the premise of Black Lives Matter is fake. In fact, I'm even more upset because I believe the premise is legitimate. I believe there is a legitimate problem between police brutality and the black community, especially targeting black men. But being as though there is this problem, these individuals that run Black Lives Matter that are getting rich off the backs of Black Lives Matter are actually exploiting Black Lives Matter. And what it's going to Okay, Lisa is coming with more information. Cullors, who resigned as BLM's executive director a year ago after spending 6 years at the helm, said she used the property twice for the events that weren't business related. So exactly, Lisa's exactly right. It was during the time that all the money was rolling in. There was a time in the late 2010s where police brutality was revved up to a very high level, and people were donating to BLM. People were donating before the incident happened in 2016 with Micah Xavier Johnson. He shot those four cops in Dallas, and that gave BLM really a bad name. But before that, you know, before that, BLM was really making all the, bringing in money hand over fist, and that was when Patrisse Cullors, I don't know how you pronounce her name, but anyway, mispronounce her name, but that's when she was making all that money, man. You know what I mean? That's when she was really doing it. Lisa is exactly right, and she used the BLM headquarters for, other than BLM official business. She says it's just twice, but twice is twice too many. You know, and she's in January of 2021. She said she received death threats on her life. She was seeking now. Um, she was seeking refuge in the property because she'd been she'd been receiving death threats on her life. Now that part I agree with. I was discussing this with Lisa when Lisa first told me about the article. I agree with that one because let's just face it, guys. There are some people in this country that are conservatives, especially white male conservatives, that are very dangerous people. I mean, they tried to overthrow the election in 2020. So it's quite possible that um, they could have threatened this woman's life. She's a member of the LGBT. Not only is she a Black Lives Matter activist, she's a member of the LGBT community. She engages in intersectionality, intersectional feminism, which is something the right, especially men on the right, completely hate and despise. And they're violent and they carry guns. We've seen many of their outbursts, over the years. May I point you to what happened in 2014 at the AME Church with Dylan Roof? You know what I mean? So it is possible that she had, threats on her life and she had to use the property for that reason. And this goes back to an earlier point that Lisa and I were talking about when we said we don't think that this new Black Lives Matter or that any of these new organizations should have figureheads, should have men and women representing them necessarily. I mean, yes, having tremendous charisma like Candace Owens has, or having tremendous charisma like the old school civil rights leaders like Martin Luther King or and Malcolm X, or even becoming a face of an internet movement like the men's rights activism like Kevin Samuels. That's very good, but at the same time, with that increased attention comes increased haters, and you have to watch your every move because if you mess up and you mismanage funds somehow, they're going to call you out like they're doing Cullors, or they're going to, your haters, the enemies of your ideology, are going to try to call you out and try to, kill you like they did with Cullors. So it's better to have like no leader and no face of it. Even like let the message speak for itself. You don't really necessarily need um, a charismatic man or woman to be the face of it because we've seen throughout American history, especially in the 60s, when a lot of these movements had, leaders at the helms of them, like Huey Newton and the Panthers, or Malcolm X, and Elijah Muhammad and the Nation of Islam, or Martin Luther King. What did they do? They either took them down through government infiltration, like COINTELPRO, or they had them assassinated. So while it is good to have a leader of a movement, because somebody got to be leading this football team, you know what I mean? Somebody got to be the quarterback of this, you know what I mean? At the same time, having a leader, you run a risk of something like that happening. So I do believe that that probably did happen to her. You know, she did have, but at the same time, I feel like the money that she makes should be going to these victims. The victims' families should be getting the vast majority of this money. The victims' families should be living in $1 million homes, you know, in gated communities with cops all around. And you can't help but wonder, one of the most extremist slogans that the BLM activists came out with in 20 and 2020 and 2021, and Lisa knows this, and Lisa disagrees with me on this, is the whole defund the police thing. I was initially for defund the police, but I have seen the results of the defund the police initiative in my own city of New York, and it has not been pretty. You know what I mean? It has been drastic. But that's a point to hypocrisy. If she's for defunding the police, why is she herself, and Candace points this out, why does she herself have private police on hand in her own home? Like, so the public can't have police, but you can have police, you can have private security. It's sort of like how people that are against the Second Amendment always say, oh, guns for me, but not for thee. The government and the people in power can have guns, but you, the ordinary citizens, cannot have guns. So just in case the government comes after your ass and tries to light your ass up, you have no way to defend yourself. So this whole defund the police initiative that a lot of the people on the far left are pushing, I see now is I get the principle behind it. You know what I mean? I get why people want to defund the police, because the police are crooked in most American cities. They're racist. They target black men. You know what I mean? In initiatives like Stop and Frisk, because even though Breonna Taylor was the victim and she was a black woman, they were looking for her boyfriend. They weren't really looking for her, so they were still targeting. It was still black men were still a target of this, of what they were doing to Breonna Taylor. So I get what people are saying, but jumping to the other conclusion and abolishing the police totally or defunding the police, taking money out of the pockets of police, is the totally wrong way to go. Not that I have answers. I don't know how we could solve this issue. The idea, the mistrust that exists between the African American community and the police department is something that goes way back and is a very complex issue. You know what I mean? So I don't myself have answers, but and it's definitely not defunding the police. Candace Owens being pregnant went to the property where Carlos was, and she was filming a video at BLM, and the funds that she was wondering where it went. Yes, exactly. Candace is pregnant. Congratulations to Candace and her husband. Again, she is a typical conservative woman. She is gonna have like another child. Conservative women always seem to be pregnant. But yeah, she went to the woman's house and she questioned the woman. Where are the funds going? It seemed like the funds are not getting to the families. And you know what this reminds me of is like when the United States, and this was back in the 90s, when the United States would give aid to countries like Haiti or Somalia or countries like Venezuela or Colombia, right? These third world countries, and they would give the aid to them, and it would get to the people in power, but it would never get to the citizens. It would never, the goods and the money and the food would never trickle down to the citizens. So as people give donations to BLM, it doesn't trickle down to the ordinary black citizens. But you got to think the political game behind it, though, Lise. You know what I'm saying? They want to keep you perpetually angry, and they want to keep you perpetually poor and impoverished because they want to continue to blame it on police or blame it on the infrastructure. They don't want to actually solve issues. They just want to continue to make you mad so you continue to vote them into power. That's the way I look at it. I always see it. I see it in a similar way with doctors. I always say that doctors are not really vested in, don't have a real vested interest in curing you, because if you were cured, then you wouldn't need a doctor. So if these issues that caused the violent crime within the community, which was disenfranchisement, lack of resources, lack of gainful, lucrative employment, were ever solved, then we wouldn't need people like BLM to advocate for police brutality, because if there was a prosperous community, we wouldn't need we wouldn't have these interactions necessarily with police all the time. You know what I mean? But I just think that they figured out a new avenue, people in BLM, and it really is a shame because what they're advocating for, what they're fighting for, is a true cause. There is police brutality in the community. There are people that suffer at the hands of cops all the time, and it is a targeting of black people. It is, but because they're doing this now, it's like nobody's gonna put their faith and trust in this organization anymore. As it became corporatized, as it had started to have the big money backing of like the George Soroses of the world, now people are like, okay, this is too big time. It's If you're mainstream, you ain't punk rock anymore. And now with them misappropriating funds, ain't nobody gonna trust them anymore. You know, and that is a shame because you don't want to ever think that a person like Candace Owens is right. You know what I mean? You don't want to think Candace Owens. You don't want to ever give it up to Candace Owens that she's right, but in this one, she's right. After Candace went to the property, Cullors made an Instagram video crying about being there and denying about the stuff going on. But then a few days later, see, so she lied. That's another thing. Okay, she she went on there in Instagram. I saw the Instagram video that you sent me, Liz. Thank you for reminding me. She went on there and um she went on there. She lied. She said that what Candace saying wasn't true. She denied what Candace was saying, and then 2 days later, she came out with another video talking about that was true what Candace was saying. So which one is it? You know what I mean? Which one is it? Did you use the funds or didn't you use the funds? Now you've admitted to using the funds. So why should anybody donate to your freaking cause? You know what I'm saying? Why should they donate to your cause when your cause is complete bullshit? Not the cause is bullshit, but your organization is bullshit. You have sold out the organization. You have sold out the cause with the organization. You've used this cause as a get rich scheme. One thing I respect about Republicans, they're greedy for money and all that shit. But when they put out an organization, they're being capitalistic, right? They don't make a pretense that they put out an organization for anything else other than making money, other than the profit incentive. You think that Candace Owens is going to put out this documentary for free? You think that Candace Owens is going to put out this documentary for the health of the people? No. Do you think that Nesta Souza does it for the health of the people? No, but they don't pretend like they do and then later find out they didn't. The founders of Black Lives Matter don't. The founders of Black Lives Matter don't piss on me and tell me it's raining. You know what I mean? If I give money to an organization like Black Lives Matter or an organization like the Me Too movement, I better know that the money that I'm giving to that organization is going to further that social agenda for the betterment of women in the case of Me Too, and then for the betterment of black people in the case of BLM. If it ain't, then I have no business, me or anybody else, giving money to that organization. Because y'all ain't solved nothing yet. All you did was push through in the mainstream political sphere initiatives to defund the police, which have made it worse for black people and brown people in urban areas, because now we're at the mercy of savage gangs that really don't give a fuck about the average individual. While y'all sit up there in your ivory towers and your $1.6 million homes, tucked with private security, cops and guns you don't even want us to have. So y'all on some Marie Antoinette French Revolution shit, telling us, the peasants, that we're supposed to eat cake while y'all up there eating filet mignon steak. So, like Candace Owens or hate Candace Owens, whatever, one thing I respect again about the Republicans, and Malcolm X brought this out too. Go look at that speech when Malcolm X talks about the difference between liberals. He's talking about white people, but it could go for black liberals and black conservatives as well. He said a white liberal is like a sheep in wolf's clothing, and a conservative is just a wolf. A conservative won't pretend that they like you. They'll come right out and say, I don't like your ass. I don't want you around. I never wanted you around. And this is what it is. Conservatives are out for money and they're out for greed. And if anybody donates to them, they know that their money will be misappropriated. But the Democrats, the organizations like Black Lives Matter, we believed in y'all. We believed that y'all were going to go out there and change the interactions between African Americans and the police department. That y'all were going to make a difference in this world, bring some justice, financial and otherwise, to the victims of police brutality, to the Breonna Taylors, to the Trayvon Martins, to the George Floyds and all, and to the Eric Garners. But y'all ain't done jack shit but buy yourself a $106 million home and throw parties for your son. Right, and Lisa is right. Since 2020, I haven't heard nothing. BLM is deader in the news than COVID. You know, I haven't heard nothing. You know, the scheme of the Democrats and the scheme of these kind of organizations use a social cause that's real, over exaggerate its impact on society, and then use it to make money. That's what democratic organizations do. That's what democratic philanthropic organizations do. They do it to disabled people all the time too. And then they get the tax exempt status, right? As a nonprofit organization. They say, oh, we're a nonprofit organization, but through the donations, they make more money, really, or just as much money as a profit organization. At least Jeff Bezos is honest, because when I order something from him, I get whatever the fuck I'm ordering from Amazon. When I order something from a nonprofit political organization like Black Lives Matter, I don't get shit. You know, all I get is more excuses. You know what I mean? So, and they do that, like I said, they do this with disabled people too, man. You'll have these disabled organizations that are for disabled advocacy. They'll come out as nonprofit, and then boom, their shit will blow up with donations. But what about the people they were intended to help? The people they were intended to help get nothing. We stay wanting, we stay needing, we stay suffering. But the people at the top, they get everything. It happens all the time with people with disabilities. UCP is a perfect example. A lot of autistic organizations, perfect example. Yeah, I will, Elise. He says, well, when can, because Candace speaking the truth on this, man. And you can say, well, Candace Owens doing it for the money too. Yes, but when has she never ever said she ain't doing it for the money? I'm talking about the people that are honest. I'm talking about the people that say they're doing it for the money and they do it for the money. You know, it's no in America. There's no shame in making money, but doing it in an honest way. Don't try to backstab people and don't try to play on people's emotions and play on a real issue, a real historical issue of white supremacy that causes the gulf between communities of color and uh, the police, and use that to enrich yourself. You know, if you really want to enrich yourself, do what Elon Musk did, do what Jeff Bezos did, do what those guys did. Become an entrepreneur and do something honest. Don't try to play on the emotions of the people and use a righteous cause for an unrighteous. Um, use a righteous cause for an unrighteous gain. You know, when you do that, it's the people that suffer, it's the families that suffer, it's the victims that suffer, and it's not only the victims that already existed and the victims that were already happened, but even the ones that will happen. Because now, no mainstream political organization, even the Democrats, even the mainstream Democratic Party, like Biden and Harris, you think they're going to want to associate with her and associate with BLM? No, they're going to turn their backs to those people because they're going to know that the majority of the public sees those people as if to appeal those people as dishonest. You know what I mean? So the mainstream politicians ain't gonna want to deal with them, so they don't have a voice anymore. Congratulations, you fucked it up. Now nobody wants to listen to BLM anymore. Now you got people like me who can't even stand Candace Owens, people like Lisa that can't even stand Candace Owens agreeing with her. See what you've done? See what this woman Cullors has done? See what she's done? She's embarrassed BLM. She's embarrassed the cause. She 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 is now the emperor with no clothes. She's the emperor with no clothes. Now we've seen that despite her telling us that BLM is out there doing the righteous thing, that BLM is out there changing the world, that BLM is changing the hearts and minds of people around America, we see that all they're really doing is buying up $1 million homes. And we're fed up. So next time you talk, we're not going to listen. It's the boy that cried wolf situation. Peace. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Hit the bell button to see when my next video is coming out. Lisa, thank you for this. We really got the ball rolling. And guys, when you put your money into an organization, yeah, yeah, of course not. Of course not. Because, I mean, most of the fighting is already done. Lisa says our generation don't have to fight like MLK and them because they were dealing with real segregation. They were dealing with Jim Crow. They were dealing with people, you know, sicking dogs on them and spraying them down with hoses. When you see those civil, you can't ever compare our generation to that generation. Our generation and oh yeah, sorry, Lisa, my mistake. My mistake, Lisa. I didn't read it. Okay. But again, I stand by that point. Our generation don't have it as hard, but we don't have, at least we don't have nobody fighting for us. Yeah, we don't. Because everybody now is too greedy. Um, I was right when I said our generation don't have nobody fight for us like our parents did in the 50s and 60s, like MLK. Yeah, we don't. Because we, another thing, there's not this sense of urgency, Lisa. It's because there's not this sense of urgency. There's not Jim Crow. There's not dogs being sick. There's not water fountains being sprayed up. There's not women getting raped in the streets. All that. There is police brutality, but at the same time, And the thing is, too, here's another thing that works against us. Being integrated in a post integration society, you always have people like the All Lives Matter people that want to shit on it anyway. You know what I mean? We can't really do our own thing and we can't really get established because the All Lives Matter people and the government and the white supremacist society will just come and stamp it out anyway. You know what I mean? It's like you make a paper house in your a paper mache house in your crib, and what does your brother do? He comes and knocks it down and it breaks. And each time you try to set one up again, he breaks it. So how can you ever do something? How can you ever do something of your own to get acclaim and praise when each time we do it, it gets knocked down? Police, yeah, police brutality is something we fight for and we've been fighting for years. Yeah, Lisa, that's true, man. But there's no organization. Louis Farrakhan has tried for years, but see, once again, the media came in. They discredited Louis Farrakhan. They discredited Jesse Jackson. They discredited Al Sharpton when they tried to fight. So each and every time, the white supremacist society will discredit them because white people, as we discussed before, nah, BLM, no. First of all, here's the thing about BLM. Lisa says BLM is not an organization to fight for us, and I don't think NAACP is either. Here's the thing with BLM, guys. That I always disagree with the organization of BLM. I always say that. Like I would say, there's three meanings to BLM. One, there's BLM, the ideology to stop police brutality against black men and women in America. Two, there is BLM, the organization. And three, obvious, black all lives matter people come in and say, well, all lives matter. Well, of course we know all lives matter, but we're talking about black lives right now. So anyway, BLM, the organization, one of the problems with them is they were too mixed up. Like you go on their website and they would advocate for not only police brutality, but LGBT rights, trans rights, this right, that right, all these other good causes. They're all good causes, but at the same time, you lose focus on what you're actually about. You know what I'm saying? Like you cannot be when you try to service everybody, you end up servicing nobody. You know, when you try to be all things to all people, you end up being nobody, no good for anybody. You know what I mean? So they were having their hands in all these other pots, advocating for all these other things in conjunction with police brutality instead of just focusing on police brutality. Like that should have been LGBT stuff, trans stuff. That stuff's important. Don't get me wrong. But our goal, our organization is to fight for black people's freedom and safety against police brutality. No other cause. That's our cause. You know what I'm saying? So if you have it as your cause, if that's your cause, if that's your mission, if that's your goal and aim, only talk about that and only bring that up. Don't let the mainstream Democratic Party, who represents a myriad of positions, try to sway you into advocating for a number of different causes. Because the right wing don't do that. When the anti-abortionist pro-life people, like the guy that came on page a couple of weeks ago when I did the Roe v. Wade video, when he came on here, was he talking about anything else besides that? Did the pro-life conservatives talk about anything else besides that? No, when they go up to Capitol Hill and they put their representatives on there, that's the only thing they talk about. That's the only thing they focus on. They have a myopic focus. You know what I'm saying? That got to be your focus. You can't focus on all this other shit. You know what I mean? Because, you know, then some of the people that don't agree with all those other agendas going to be like, well, I'm not down with that, so fuck that. And they're not going to support your organization. You wanted to be everything, but we're not talking about everything. We're talking about just this thing. You know what I mean? Like, we're not talking about everything. You wanted to bring in a lot of other groups, started talking about illegal Hispanics or LGBT stuff or trans stuff. And I get it that Alicia Garza, I think, is half Hispanic, right? And you know, some of them, some of the ladies are immigrants. But again, this is not about that. You know what I mean? This is about police brutality against African American men and women. Keep the focus on just that. Let's accomplish this before we go off and do that. Let's crawl before we walk. You know, and that was the problem with BLM. They were trying to be too many things to too many people. And right, go on their website, Lisa. It was right there. I don't know if it's still there, but it was there when they first established. And I get it. You know, you know what I mean? I get it. You some of them, some of the ladies are gay, you know, so that they have a sympathy towards um, LGBT rights, right? One of the ladies half Hispanic, so she has sympathy towards that. I get it, but when we're talking about police brutality against black people, let's just talk about that first. Let's bring that to the table. Let's bring that to the agenda first to Biden and have Biden take it serious. You know what I mean? And have Biden do something about it. You know, and once we get that done, then we can talk about all this other shit. Once that is done, once something is done to solve this issue, then all the other stuff can be talked about. We can't talk about a million things at once. Let's just focus on one thing at a time. And that's what BLM never did. Because the Asians didn't do that. I mean, Lisa, when that kid shot up that salon in Atlanta, and then we had to stop Asian hate thing going around in 2020. And then the Asian activist went up to the White House and got Biden as soon as he got in to pass that Asian crime bill. Was the Asian crime bill, was it talking about Black Lives Matter? Was it talking about Hispanics? Was it talking about LGBT stuff? Was it talking about disabled stuff? No, was just talking about just Asian, anti-Asian crimes. That was all they focused on. That was all they talked about. And that was all they should have talked about because that was their goal. Asian stuff. Yeah, you know what I mean? Like, yeah. One tragedy. And all it took for the Asian community was one tragedy, one mass shooting. One. Right, exactly. One mass shooting by a racist white incel, you know, during the pandemic, revved up by Trump. That's all it took was one. One, and they got the law passed. And Asians haven't even suffered the historical discrimination against them and the historic marginalization against them in American society, the way that African Americans and specifically foundational Black Americans have suffered in this country. They didn't go through slavery. They didn't go through generations of Jim Crow. They didn't go through redlining, blockbusting, and all of that stuff. No. But one incident happens in the Asian community, the Asian activist community is on the ass of Joe Biden, and Joe Biden moved. But you know what it is? The Democrats, right? Lisa says they passed the anti-lynching bill, but that comes on the heels. When was the last time you ever heard? They, oh yeah, Lisa. Oh yeah, you're right. When was the last time you ever heard about somebody being lynched? Lisa's absolutely right. Thank you for bringing that point up, Lisa. they'll pass something in history. They'll pass something historical about it because it's already in the past. They don't want to talk about today. They don't mind. They don't mind correcting the mistakes of the past retroactively because there's nothing we can really do about it. So they'll talk about Juneteenth. They'll talk about lynching. They'll talk about Emmett Till, but they won't talk about the shit going on right now. They don't mind. They don't mind giving you your flowers after you're dead. You know, oh, that doesn't mean nothing to them. They'll do that. You know, they'll give you that much, so just so you can keep voting for them. But it wouldn't matter anyway because they take the listen. The Democratic Party. Right. Lisa saying, like I told you, since they passed the anti-lynching, they need to convict the lady who lied on Emmett Till. But that they won't do. They'll convict. You know what they'll do? They'll convict her once she dies. They'll say, oh, you know, they'll pass some bullshit law, you know, like they did with like Trump did with Susan B. Anthony, overturning Susan B. Anthony's conviction or Jim Johnson's convictions. Um, like, oh, I'm gonna pass a law. Like, I'm gonna go up there and I'm gonna sue the Egyptian government for enslaving the Israelites in the Bible. Like, are you retarded? Like that shit happened so long ago. Nobody's even talking about that. That's like what the Democrats do here. They'll pass something in history, that will fix a mistake in history, and they'll act like they do tangibles today, modern times. Today, modern times. Not 50 years ago, not 60 years ago. And if you're going to go back 50, 60 years, like Lisa said, convict the lady. Don't care how old she is. They didn't care how old Bill Cosby was when they locked him up. But the Democrats don't care because the Democrats treat people of color, especially black people, not really Hispanics, because they know Hispanics, and they treat them like the ugly spouse. They know that ugly spouse can't go nowhere else. You know what I mean? So they take them for granted. They know that the black community is always going to vote Republican no matter what because they can't really go anywhere else because only two options and the other party is outright racist. So they take them for granted. They don't got to give them nothing. You know what I mean? All they got to do is say we love you in words, and it's just like an ugly girlfriend or boyfriend. You know he ain't going nowhere, she ain't going nowhere because nobody else wants them. You know what I mean? So the Democrats don't feel like they got to compete for the votes of African Americans because African Americans are going to vote for them anyway. So they don't give them nothing. All they do is like with that same thing with that neglected boyfriend or girlfriend. Oh, I love you. You know what I mean? Or they'll bring up something from the past, just like you bring up old times that you spent with him or her. Oh, remember when we used to do this, we used to do that, we used to do it, because they know they ain't going nowhere. They know nobody else wants them, so they're good where they're at. But the Asians are like the new hot person that the Democratic Party is just talking to, because they don't really Asians don't really vote like that, so they got to give the Asians whatever the hell they want because they want to get on the good side of the Asians. Right? When they yeah, Lisa's talking about that time they did the Black Panther thing, Wakanda forever in the middle of Congress. That was so ridiculous. Oh my God. That was the most comical shit I ever seen in my whole life. Like, but here's what African Americans can do. I'm not saying African Americans should go to the other side. But what they should do is what they did in 2016: opt out, don't vote for nobody. Let them suffer. Let them suffer. Let them lose big. And when they lose big, they'll realize, man, I took them for granted. Man, you know, I thought the African American community would always have my back, but now they don't, and they lost big. You don't have to vote for the other side out of spite. You know what I mean? Because Republicans, they make it clear they don't care about African Americans at all. But let them suffer. You know, don't vote, opt out, and then see what happens. And then they get somebody even worse than Trump, like Ron DeSantis, and then you'll be saying, "Oh well, should have treated me better. Shouldn't have took me for granted. Should have gave me something tangible that I could hook my hat on instead of some platitudes or some dressing up in costumes. I don't want you to dress in that costume. Save your dashiki, Nancy Pelosi. I want some reparations. We talking about money here. We talking about dollars and cents. Save that dashiki. Save that kufi. Save your next African American themed holiday. We don't want it. You know, we don't want it. We're talking about we want money. We want tangibles. We want resources. We want a community fix. We want answers and we want solutions. And if you can't provide that, then I'm not talking to you. Pure and simple, period. Right? Or Greg, or somebody from Texas, Greg Abbott. You got to treat this political relationship like you treat a regular relationship, guys. If your spouse cheated on you forever and they give other people things that they should have give you, what would you say? You'd be like, I don't know, I ain't talking to you no more because you treat other people. In this case, the Democrats treating the Asians, and Asians haven't even really done anything for the Democrats. They're just the new kids on the block, you know. Um, and you put everybody aside from, except me, then you wouldn't talk to that person. You would walk away from that person. Well, that's what it's like with the Democrats. I got to walk away because over the last 50, 60 years since the civil rights movement, like the last big thing they ever did for black people was the Civil Rights Act of 1964. And ever since then, they figure we don't got to do no more because we got them right where we want them. And that's the problem. You know what I mean? Other groups, other races vie for their vote. Muslims, well, what are you going to do about Palestine? The Palestine-Israel situation. Jewish people, what is America going to do to protect Israel on the international stage? Cuban people, you saw the Cuban community got up there and got upset when the United States, lifted the embargo from Cuba. Some of the Cuban people that don't agree with Fidel Castro, they got upset. They advocate for their rights. Asian people with the anti-Asian hate bill. All these other communities, they get in there and they advocate for their rights. They're not trying to talk about everybody else's rights because I'm not here to talk about everybody else. I'm here to talk about my stuff. I'm here. My organization is here for one thing. They're here to represent my constituency and my people. I don't know about any other people. Do you think AIPAC that advocates for Israel advocates for African Americans? Do you think all these Mexican organizations or even these organizations like GLAD that are run by white LGBT people, you think they care about BLM? No, they don't go up there talking about advocating for no BLM. They're talking about LGBT rights and LGBT rights only. you know, and if Biden's not giving it to them, they'll go somewhere else. They'll vote for an independent candidate or they'll sit it out. That's how these groups do. That's what politics is. That's what representative government is, guys. You send your representative. This is why it is important to study social studies. Not only studying, people say history, right? But not just history, civics. When we learn in our school about what is democracy, when you send your representative to student council, you tell your student council rep everything you want, and they're supposed to speak on your behalf. You know, and that's what an organization like BLM was supposed to be. An organization like BLM was supposed to go in there and advocate for um, against police brutality, for something to be done about police brutality that is sensible, not defund the police. Right, exactly. Lisa said hit it right on nail. Black organizations are the only organizations that fight for everything else except for stuff for their own community. Yes, they go in there talking about LGBT rights. They go in there talking about people of color rights, immigrants, all this other shit. These groups got organizations advocating for them. They don't need you to speak for them. You know, feminist white women, they got organizations. Jewish people got organizations. LGBT people got organizations. Muslims got organizations. Hispanic Americans like Cubans got organizations advocating for them. They all got organizations advocating for them and advocating for them better than your organizations are advocating for you. You know, you. And they always come with this shit like, oh, the poor, because then they feel bad. They want to include poor whites. Poor whites are mostly Republicans, so they're not listening to you anyway. They hate and despise you. They're more poor whites that are racist than rich whites that are racist because the way the system is set up. But then, they'll go in there advocating for pretty much anybody. I mean, there could be an organization called One Legged Lesbians United, and Black Lives Matter will jump up and be partners with One Legged Lesbians United. And talk about, oh, we can't just talk about the black struggle. We got to talk about the one-legged lesbian struggle too, because they've been historically marginalized. Yeah, so, but we're not talking about that. And then it's funny because they get on the All Lives Matter people, but aren't they? They're saying exactly the same thing as the freaking All Lives Matter people, but without including white people. Y'all not really advocating for purely against police brutality and purely against the stoppage of police brutality. Y'all going up there playing games, talking about we got to have an all inclusive agenda with shit that don't even is not even connected. Yes, we know you're LGBT, but LGBTism is not connected to police brutality. No, Lisa, that's wrong. I did trust them when they first came out, but when they started to become real big, and I read their manifesto, I read their website. Um, I didn't like that they were including everybody because I saw, as a student of history, I saw the failures of that. You know what I mean? We did that before. Al Sharpton used to do shit like that. Jesse Jackson had the Rainbow Coalition in the 80s. That's nothing new. And the only thing different now is you put black in the title. We did that before, and that didn't work, advocating for everybody, because here's what happens. When you start to do that, other groups get their rights, other groups get their agenda spoken to, and then the black people that started the movement are left there looking stupid, still holding a sign, and the other groups done moved on. And not only have the other groups done moved on, now these other groups are racist against you. So it's not that I didn't trust them at first. I supported them at first. Of course, I support um, ending police brutality against young black men in this society. Of course, Lisa. But once I started to see that they had this all-inclusive message, I'm like, oh shit, that ain't gonna work. Because we've been down that road before. That's what made the Nation of Islam work. That's what made the Nation of Islam work. It didn't work completely because it was tied to a religion, and it was tied to dogmatism, and it was tied to the honor, Elijah Muhammad and his greed and stuff. But what made it work different than BLM, and even what made Martin Luther King's organization work initially, is Martin Luther King wasn't talking about 1,000,001 issues at once. Martin Luther King was talking about ending segregation, and that was it. He had an agenda, he had a clear plan, and he went up there and he told Lyndon B. Johnson what it was. And that's why it worked. Nation of Islam, they had a clear agenda. They wasn't including nobody else. It wasn't a broad-based organization including 1,000,001 groups. They were only talking about what they were talking about. And they had a clear agenda, and that's what they were on, and that's what they stayed on. That's why those organizations worked. BLM didn't work because from the beginning, well, not from the very beginning, but early on, because they were receiving money from these big liberal donors like George Soros, you know, they started to have this all-inclusive organization shit. And I'm like, isn't that the same thing we accomplished when we elected Barack Obama? Isn't that the problem that a lot of people have with Barack Obama, including myself? You know what I mean? The problem that we had with Obama was he was always passing shit for other communities and not passing anything for specifically the black community. Oh well, at least this BLM didn't include everybody because they didn't include the disabled. Yeah, well, they never include us. They never include us, except the Black Panthers. The Camp Crip thing. But these organizations never include us. I remember when I spoke with Congressman Charles Barron in 2008. I met with him when he came to my mosque, and he was, kissing the ass of the Muslim community, telling them, that when he becomes a congressman, he will, prevent discrimination against, Islamophobia against members of the Muslim community. And uh, I raised my hand and said, well, what are you going to do about the trains for people with disabilities? Are you going to put the pressure on the mayor to make the trains more accessible for individuals with disability? This was before the time that train safety was an issue. And he completely ignored me, gave me some bullshit runaround politician answer. I'm like, okay, at this point, I'm no longer listening because I asked you a direct question and you didn't give me a direct answer. So they never uh, they never include us ever. We're never included because we don't matter to them, and our organizations are just like black organizations. They don't do enough to push for us. Republicans come in and they cut the budget so that people like myself can get wheelchairs, and it takes months and months for us to get wheelchairs, even through these organizations like YI and UCP. It doesn't matter to them because these organizations say, oh, well, just continue to wait, even though we have lives and we have routines that we have to do that are very important, not only medical, but social and financial as well. But do they care? No. All they care about is embezzling money. Just like with the black organizations, because as long as the problem exists, they'll exist to so-called solve the problem. That's their political agenda. That's their um, modus operandi, if you will. They're not invested in finding solutions. They're invested in perpetuating the problem and continue to talk about it. Because in the end of the day, that's what politics is. Talk. Why do you think in the hood the word, a synonym for talking, is politicking? Because that's all politics is talk. It's hot wind and hot air. You know, even with Roe v. Wade, they ever really overturned Roe v. Wade, it'd be the worst thing for the Republicans, because what would a lot of Republican politicians have to run on Roe v. Wade get overturned? It'd be the best thing for the Democrats, because now the Democrats are on, they have to be on the offensive, and people respect people on the offensive more times, 9 times out of 10, than they do on the defensive. Anyway, guys, that's pretty much it. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Hit the bell button to see my next videos coming out. Love y'all. Thank you, Lisa, for contributing. Oh, yeah, I know that. I know that, man. Lisa says medicine. He's a war veteran. But again, he's not like, I mean, he's disabled too, at least like us, but he's not like us. We saw when we were going to Access, um, there is a difference socially between people that are born disabled versus people that, you know, were born able-bodied and became disabled. You know, it's sort of like the difference between ADOS or foundational Black Americans and Black immigrants. You're saying it's not as bad because you just came here. You haven't been dealing with it your whole life. You know. But yeah, I'll check him out though, Lise. Thank you. I'll check up more about him. Anyway, peace.